Keep them calm or take them outside. The order echoed through the glass lobby, sharp and impatient. The twins froze, fingers locked in white-knuckled fear, the elevator lights blinking like a threat. Then a janitor stopped his cart, knelt beside them, and spoke softly. Not to command, not to rush, but to listen. And in that quiet moment, everything began to change. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. The glass lobby of Monroe Systems never truly slept. Even at midnight, the lights glowed too bright, reflecting off steel and marble like a place that didn't believe in rest. Outside, the city roared softly, sirens, tires on wet asphalt, the distant hum of late trains, but inside, everything felt sealed, controlled, almost fragile. Victoria Monroe stood near the elevators, phone clenched in her hand, jaw tight with restraint. To the world, she was a celebrated tech CEO, decisive, brilliant, relentless. But tonight, none of that mattered. Beside her stood her twin daughters, Lily and Emma. 7 years old. Identical coats, identical shoes. Identical fear. They stared at the elevator doors as if they were alive. This wasn't new. It had started 2 years ago, after an incident no one liked to talk about anymore. Since then, elevators meant panic, screaming, freezing, shaking so hard Victoria could feel it through their hands. Therapists had labeled it acute situational anxiety. Consultants suggested exposure schedules and firm boundaries. None of it worked. The security guard hovered nearby, helpless. "Their driver's late," he said awkwardly. "We can, wait." Emma's breathing quickened. Lily pressed her face into Victoria's coat. Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the familiar surge of guilt and frustration. "I can fix companies. Why can't I fix this?" That was when the janitor arrived. His cart rolled softly across the floor, keys chiming faintly. Ethan Brooks, overnight janitor, mid-30s, calm eyes that had seen too much and learned to stay gentle anyway. He noticed the girls instantly, not with annoyance, but with understanding. He stopped a few feet away and crouched down. "Hey there," he said quietly. "That elevator giving you trouble?" Lily didn't answer. Emma shook her head, but her grip tightened. Ethan nodded, as if that made perfect sense. He pulled a pen from his pocket and drew a quick picture on a scrap of paper, a tiny elevator with buttons. He circled one and added little stars around it. "This one's special," he said. "It's the sparkle button." "There's no sparkle button," Lily whispered. "I know," Ethan said gently. "That's why it only works for captains." The word landed softly. Captains. He stood and stepped into the elevator alone, turning back to them. "You get to decide. I won't touch anything." The doors stayed open. Waiting. Victoria held her breath. After a long moment, Emma took Lily's hand. Together, they stepped forward. Inside, Ethan counted quietly. No rushing. No commands. Just calm. When the elevator moved, nothing bad happened. When the doors opened again, Lily blinked in disbelief. They rode it twice more. By the time their car arrived, the twins were exhausted, but smiling. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest for the first time in years. As they left, she turned back to Ethan. "Would you come tomorrow?" she asked, voice unsteady. "Not as staff. As you." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "I'll bring my son. He's good with missions." Victoria didn't know why tears burned her eyes, but she knew this wasn't just about elevators. And Ethan knew something else too. That building. That elevator. It had taken something from him once. And tomorrow, the past would start catching up. Victoria Monroe's townhouse overlooked the river, all clean lines and smart glass, designed to impress investors and keep the outside world at a careful distance. Sunlight poured in the next afternoon, bouncing off pale walls and minimalist furniture that had never known finger paint or cardboard forts. At exactly 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Victoria opened the door to find Ethan Brooks standing there in a clean jacket, his posture respectful but relaxed. Beside him was his son, Caleb, 9 years old, curious eyes, backpack slung over one shoulder like he was prepared for anything. "Hi," Caleb said first, polite and confident. "Is this mission control?" Ethan winced slightly. "We talked about easing into it, buddy." But Victoria surprised them both by smiling, really smiling. "I think," she said, stepping aside, "mission control sounds perfect." The twins watched from the staircase, half hidden behind the railing. Lily clutched Emma's sleeve. Their fear hadn't vanished overnight, it never did, but curiosity flickered where panic usually lived. Caleb noticed immediately. He didn't rush them. He just opened his backpack and began laying things out on the coffee table: colorful tape, stickers shaped like stars and rockets, a thermos of cocoa, and a small hand-drawn map. "Rule 1, he announced calmly, as if reading from a manual. "No missions without consent." Emma's head tilted. Lily peeked out a little more. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. No one had ever said that word, consent, about her daughter's fear before. Ethan stayed back, letting Caleb lead. He watched his son with quiet pride. Caleb had learned these rules the hard way, after nights when fear had lived in their own small apartment, after a long-ago accident Ethan still carried like a scar under his ribs. Caleb knelt and placed the map on the floor. "This house," he said, "has different zones. Safe zones. Challenge zones. And no-go zones. You decide which is which." Slowly, cautiously, Lily stepped forward and pointed. "The stairs are safe." Emma added, "The kitchen too." Victoria held her breath, resisting the urge to guide them, correct them, hurry them. Ethan met her eyes briefly and gave a small nod. "Let them lead." They taped stars along the hallway, "Sparkle Path," Caleb called it, marking places where the girls could stop, breathe, or turn back. No pressure. No countdowns. Just permission. When cocoa was poured, Lily asked quietly, "Do missions ever fail?" Caleb considered this seriously. "Yeah. Sometimes. But that just means you learn something." Something inside Victoria cracked open. Later, they stood in the garage, facing the private elevator that connected the townhouse levels. The twins froze at the threshold. Old fear surged back, sharp and familiar. Ethan didn't move forward. He didn't speak right away. "This one's different," he said finally. "This is an advanced mission. We don't have to do it today." The relief on the girls' faces was immediate. Victoria felt it too, and with it, a wave of shame. How many times had she pushed them because she couldn't stand waiting? Emma squeezed Lily's hand. "Maybe, we just stand here." Caleb nodded. "Standing counts." They stood. The elevator stayed silent. No one cried. No one failed. That night, after Ethan and Caleb left, Victoria sat alone on the couch, the quiet louder than any boardroom. She replayed the afternoon, not the success, but the patience. For the first time, she understood something that no report or expert had ever taught her. Her daughters didn't need fixing. They needed safety. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan Brooks felt the past stirring, because that elevator, that pause, that choice to wait instead of force. That was where everything had gone wrong before. And soon, the truth he'd buried would come dangerously close to the surface. By the third visit, the twins had rules taped neatly to the walls. Rule 1, captains decide the speed. Rule 2, anyone can stop a mission. Rule 3, quiet is not failure. Victoria read them every morning before work, as if they were instructions for a life she was still learning how to live. Ethan and Caleb came twice a week now. Not hired help, never that, but practice friends, as Emma insisted on calling them. They built routines out of ordinary things, counting steps, choosing music, turning lights on and off until control felt real again. The girls laughed more. They slept better. And sometimes, just sometimes, they asked to ride the elevator. Always on their terms. On one gray afternoon, rain streaked the windows and the city pressed in close. They stood in the garage again, the elevator doors closed like a held breath. Lily traced the sparkle path with her toe. "Today," she said carefully, "we go to the second floor." Victoria felt the familiar spike of adrenaline, and forced herself to step back. Caleb held up a finger. "Captain Lily's call." Ethan stood still, hands open, eyes calm. But inside him, something tightened. The hum of the elevator motor seeped through the walls, low and familiar, and memory stirred, metal groaning, lights flickering, a scream he'd never been able to forget. He swallowed. The doors slid open. Everyone stepped inside. Lily pressed the button. The doors closed. The elevator began to move, then stopped with a jolt so small it barely registered. But for Ethan, the floor vanished. The sound was the same. The pause. The waiting. His breath caught. His vision narrowed. For a split second, he wasn't here, he was years ago, in a hospital building that smelled like bleach and panic, watching an elevator freeze between floors while alarms screamed and no one came. Emma noticed first. "Mr. Ethan." Ethan forced himself back into the present. He knelt quickly, grounding himself, palms flat against the floor. "Hey," he said, steadying his voice. "Everything's okay." The elevator resumed. One smooth glide. Doors opening. Lily stared up at him, eyes wide, not afraid of the elevator, but of him. "You got scared." Ethan met her gaze. He didn't lie. He didn't deflect. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." Victoria's chest tightened. This was the moment she would have filled with reassurance or distraction. Ethan didn't. "Fear happens," he continued. "Even to grown-ups. Even to captain's helpers." Emma thought about this. "But you stayed." "I stayed," Ethan agreed. When the doors opened fully, the girls stepped out on their own. No celebration. No cheering. Just calm. Later, after the twins ran upstairs, Victoria lingered in the garage. "You don't have to come back," she said gently. "If this is too much." Ethan shook his head. "It's not too much. It's just old." He hesitated, then added, "I lost someone in an elevator accident. Long time ago. I thought I'd put it away." Victoria absorbed this in silence. For once, she didn't reach for solutions. "I'm glad you told them," she said finally. "They need to see that fear doesn't make people disappear." Ethan nodded. "That's the lesson I never got." Upstairs, Lily taped a new rule to the wall. Rule 4, brave means staying. And for the first time since that night years ago, Ethan believed it might be true. The change didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, the way real things do. Victoria stopped scheduling back-to-back calls during Ethan and Caleb's visits. She silenced her phone. She sat on the floor with the twins and drank cocoa that was always a little too sweet. She learned to wait, an act that felt more radical to her than any corporate gamble she'd ever made. The elevator became part of the house again. Not every day. Not without hesitation. But it was no longer the enemy. One evening, Lily pressed the button and leaned her head against Emma's shoulder. "It's just a box," she said thoughtfully. "It doesn't decide." Ethan felt the words land like a small mercy. A week later, Victoria asked Ethan to stay after the girls went to bed. The house was quiet, lights dimmed to their evening setting. She didn't sit behind a desk. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug she'd forgotten to drink. "I've had 3 specialists call me this week," she said. "All asking what program we're using now." Ethan frowned. "Program?" She smiled faintly. "That's the problem. They think this is a system." He was silent, already uncomfortable. "I want to be very clear," Victoria continued. "I don't want to turn what you do into therapy. Or branding. Or content." She paused. "But I also don't want to pretend your time doesn't have value." She slid a single page across the table. "Not a contract in the legal sense. No clauses, no penalties. Just an agreement, hours, pay, boundaries. Only if you want," she said quickly. "And only on your terms." Ethan read it slowly. His first instinct was to refuse. He'd spent years avoiding anything that smelled like obligation after the accident, after the lawsuits, the questions, the blame that had never fully found a home. But then he thought of Caleb's backpack. Of the twins' rules taped to the walls. Of fear that didn't need conquering, just company. "I don't want authority over them," he said carefully. "You won't have it," Victoria replied. "You'll have respect." That word mattered. He nodded once. "Then okay." Upstairs, unseen, Caleb listened from the stairs, heart pounding, not because of money, but because his father was stepping back into something he'd sworn off long ago, responsibility that could be taken away. The next morning, Victoria stood in the elevator with the twins, alone for the first time. "Sparkle button?" Emma asked. Victoria shook her head gently. "Not today. Today we just ride." The elevator moved. No panic. No countdown. When they reached the lobby, Lily squeezed Victoria's hand. "You didn't rush us." Victoria swallowed. "I'm learning." That afternoon, she drafted a proposal for her company's internal wellness team, quietly, without fanfare. Not a product. A pilot. Support for families navigating fear, designed around patience instead of pressure. She didn't put Ethan's name on it. Not yet. Because some things were still fragile. And because Ethan Brooke still hadn't told her the full truth, about the accident, about the investigation that never quite closed, about why elevators would always be more than metal and cables to him. The city outside kept moving, impatient as ever. But inside that house, something steadier was being built. Something that didn't belong to power. Something that belonged to trust. The day everything came full circle arrived without warning. It was a Monday, ordinary, gray, forgettable. Victoria was in the middle of a call when her assistant's voice broke through, tight with urgency. "There's been an incident at the downtown campus," she said. "An elevator stalled. No injuries, but..." Victoria was already standing. She didn't take the car. She took the stairs, heart hammering, the city blurring past the windows as if it sensed what was coming. When she reached the lobby, she saw the familiar yellow tape, the cluster of employees, the security guards trying to keep order. And then she saw Ethan. He was seated on the floor just outside the stalled elevator, back against the wall, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. Inside the elevator, through the narrow gap, 2 junior employees sat on the floor, shaken but breathing steadily. Ethan's voice was calm. Measured. "You're doing great," he said. "Nothing's moving because it's supposed to stay still right now. That's all." Victoria stopped a few feet away. He didn't look at her. He was fully present, exactly the way he'd been with Lily and Emma. The fire department arrived quickly. The doors were opened. The employees were escorted out, shaken but unharmed. Only when it was over did Ethan's hands begin to tremble. Victoria waited until the lobby cleared. Then she sat beside him on the cold marble floor, CEO title forgotten. "You didn't leave," she said quietly. Ethan stared straight ahead. "I used to." He took a long breath. "The accident, years ago. Hospital elevator. Power surge. Stalled for nearly an hour. My wife was inside. Complications. She didn't make it." Victoria's chest tightened, but she didn't interrupt. "I blamed the building. The company. Myself," Ethan continued. "I quit everything that felt important. Took a job where no one expected me to be responsible for lives. And now?" Victoria asked. "Now I stay," he said. "Because someone once stayed for my son when I couldn't." Upstairs, hours later, Lily and Emma waited by the door when Ethan arrived with Caleb. They didn't run. They didn't cheer. Lily simply asked, "Was it a hard mission?" "Yes," Ethan said honestly. Emma nodded. "Did you use the rules?" "All of them." They led him to the wall where the rules were taped. Lily added one more, carefully, in uneven letters. "Rule 5, you don't have to be fearless to help." Weeks later, Victoria stood in the same glass lobby where it had all begun. This time, she wasn't waiting for a car. She stood with her daughters, hands joined, as the elevator doors opened. No sparkle button. No counting. Just trust. When they reached the top floor, Lily laughed, soft, surprised. Emma leaned into Victoria's side. Behind them, Ethan and Caleb watched, not as saviors, not as staff. Just people who had stayed long enough for fear to loosen its grip. The city kept rushing. But inside that elevator, something had finally learned how to hold. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.